Hello and welcome to everyone who's joining us here today for our what has become an annual tradition, where the partners here at RSR go through what we saw at NRF this year. It's 20 plus years for me now. It's been 30 something for Brian. And we're going to talk about, in a very objective way, the most interesting things that we saw, what we think those things mean for the industry, and perhaps most importantly to us, what it means for our research agenda going forward for 2026. So thanks for taking the time. We're going to try to do this in about 45 minutes. That may or may not happen, but we'll do our very, very best. The very first thing is the required housekeeping. If you have any questions, please submit them at any time. We will try to get to them. We promise whatever we don't get to in the session itself today, we will follow up via email, something we pride ourselves on doing. And as always, this is not meant to be a comprehension substitute for why you shouldn't talk to these people and get full demos. We're just going to share some very high level findings of what we saw. And if any of it intrigues you, we certainly encourage you to reach out to those folks and have your own further conversations. There'll be contact information for us here at RSR at the end of the presentation if you want to dig in with us a little bit more. And we certainly encourage that as well. We would love to know, as particularly as it relates to our research agenda for this year, one, what you think of it. Two, if we're missing anything. And three, if you have any ideas that we didn't even consider. And we are recording today's presentation. Everyone who's pre-registered will receive a link to this. We'll put it up on YouTube and we'll be up there competing against box opening videos and Justin Bieber videos. But the truth of the matter is it'll be there forever and you can come back and watch it whenever you want and share it with everyone. We're not passing around anyone's contact information. This is purely just for educational purposes. So if you are here, you probably know something about us, but we've been around. This is year 19 at this point. And we are a very, very different kind of analyst firm. Each year sort of bears that out even more. When you think of analysts and you think of the Forresters and the Gartners of the world, those guys do a great job doing what they do. It is not what we do. It never has been and it never will be. We're not going to rate any technologists on a quadrant or a wave. We were a company started by retailers for retailers out of a simple concept, which is, wouldn't it be great to know what everyone else is doing and how they're dealing with the challenges that are facing us all? So there are essentially two sides to our business. There are the benchmark reports that we do. They inform everything else. We do 10, 12 a year. They're topic specific. We've been doing them since 2007. They're all available for free. And they dig into things like, what are the external challenges that you're facing? What are you doing about those? And how are you planning to get past them, namely with technology? Again, we don't play specific technologies, but we ask very detailed, very granular questions about what types of technologies have you already implemented, which are the ones that you're looking to replace, which are the ones that you haven't gotten to yet, but you're budgeted for. And we do that throughout all these topics, and we've been doing it for years. The other side of our business is everything else that enables. And namely, the thing that we've been doing an awful lot of lately is advisory services, where we work sometimes with retailers, but typically with technology solutions providers to help make sure that their message is completely lined up to what retailers are telling us on the other side of the fence. As you're about to see, this NRF was chock full of really convincing technologies. And we're reaching a point, I don't want to say where there's parity, but we're reaching a point where technologies are better today than they've been at any point in our recent history or our memories. And the question is, how do retailers make sense of that? How do you make sure that your message stands out from the crowd? How do you make sure that you're not just getting, drowned out? And how do you cut through? So those are the two sides of our business. We're happy to talk to you about either of them at any point. On the top line here, you see the three partners. Brian on the left, Paula in the middle, myself on the right there. Before anybody asks the question, yes, we all want to be Paula when we grow up. Paula is on sabbatical and then comes out of sabbatical and decides there's a topic she really wants to write about. And she has that prerogative. She was a founding partner, and we're happy to have her input any and all times that we can. For example, last year, one of the most interesting reports that we wrote that we did not think of without our input was, how are retailers and manufacturers reacting to everything that's going on with all this tariff stuff? And it became one of our most widely distributed reports of the year, and it was a lot of fun. So while she has stepped away from the day-to-day, you never know when she's going to pop up, and we love that about her. On the bottom level here, our team is expanding. Linda Wolf is on the left. She is our director of business development and has been for a very long time. And this year at NRF itself, we added Britt here on the right to basically go around and meet all the companies that were in one of three categories. Either they were net new to the industry and we had not had a chance to speak before, they were net new to us and we just never had an opportunity, or they were someone that's been around for a while and we just have not had contact with. So if Britt reached out to you, maybe this time next year, we'll be talking about what we saw from you at the show or throughout the course of the year. So that's our team, and we're really proud of what we do. We're really, really proud of how different we are, and that we've carved out this space that we felt there was a lot of need for, and all the industry has done over the last 20 years has proved that we were onto something. So let's talk about the show. When I showed this photo to Paula, she said it gave her an anxiety attack. This this was a very different show than I, for one, expected. For starters, and we're calling it the show we were hoping for. For starters, there was a lot less AI buzz than there was in recent years. If you've attended this event in the past, you know one of our biggest gripes has been that there's basically two kinds of NRF shows, right? There's the ones where there's bright shiny objects and everyone's talking about what's theoretically possible without a lot of practical solutions to back it up, or some sort of gap, some sort of suspension of disbelief that you're supposed to harbor. Oh, well, I'm sure that works behind, and then you scratch the surface a little bit and it doesn't. That has been the case for too many years now with AI. It wasn't this year. When I walked up to the Javits, I was amazed. It wasn't even on the side of the building. Sure, the marquee out front, where sponsors have running, on the LED screen have running ads. There was a lot of mention of AI. But NRF, to their credit, said, we're going with the next now, right? So we're turning a corner here. And it was really evident on the show floor that this was a show about practical applications, meant to solve real world problems. And I think almost everything we're going to show you today is emblematic of that. These are not solutions in search of a problem. These are solutions that have either evolved or been purpose-built to solve a very real problem that retailers continually tell us in our research faces them on a day-to-day basis. The third thing that was really interesting is some of these demos that we saw, we'd seen things that were kind of similar before, right? Sometimes from that vendor, sometimes from someone else, sometimes from someone who'd come and gone. But what they really represented was the actualization of some technologies that were once before their time and are now very much functional and very much of the moment. And then I know it's not, we're not supposed to get woo-woo about this, but like I said, we've been going to a lot of these things for a lot of years. There was great energy on that show floor, and everyone that we spoke to sort of echoed that back to us. There was some consensus from the booths. We feel that we've earned the right. It was a pretty busy 3 days. We were in 64 booths. We had 22 proper 30-minute briefings. And one of the things that sort of popped up from everyone was it was a different audience than in years past. Traffic was down a little bit on Sunday, which got some people down on the mouth at first, but then when Monday came around, it more than made up for it. Sunday has typically been the international day, and on a number of occasions, technologists told us just wasn't the case. What there was, particularly kicking in on Monday, was the right types of attendees from the right types of retailers asking the right kinds of questions. And what that reflects back to us is something that we hoped for going in, which is that retailers have done their homework here. They were asking deeply sophisticated buying questions, and that means, without tooting our own horn, that they've been getting industry information somewhere along the line that you can't keep doing things the way you've been doing. You really do need to dig in at some point. And that's in perfect pitch with all of our findings from this year. So when you take those two things and you combine them, the bellwether that the show is and always will be, combined with the findings, particularly the findings that we're seeing in the latter part of 2025, we're making a prediction here, which we don't really do. We're not prognosticators, but we think this is going to be a transformative year. So we're going to walk through, we've segmented everything that we were able to see on the show floor into 6 categories. And some of them, you're going to see a little bleed between one or another. But these are the things that we like the most. The first is that there's a renewed focus on the store. I don't mean to sound like a broken record here, but I can't tell you how many demos we've sat in about a store of the future that just didn't pass muster. The store of the future is not particularly futuristic right now. The store of the future, particularly as it relates to what we were able to see on the show floor, seems very practical. It seems very attainable. And we saw an awful lot of content around that. So that's number one, and we'll walk you through some of the booths that fall into that category. The second thing that we really liked was there seems to have been a honing of the workforce management space. If you attended this webinar either last year or perhaps even the year before, um, I think I was the one probably grumbling about this the most. That space has gotten really noisy and really chaotic. People who've spent their entire careers working in task management all of a sudden say, oh, we also can handle scheduling, and vice versa. We saw a lot less chaos there this year. And we're going to share with you some of the more intuitive solutions that we saw in that space, which if you visit a retail store, you know is overdue, right? I mean, we talk till we're blue in the face about how consumers are becoming trained to solve for their own problems every time they walk into a store because we've all gotten a little too used to the notion of an in-store or a frontline associate who neither has the training nor the technology nor the motivation to really be helpful or relevant. And we're seeing a lot of solutions designed to work around that reality and bring those things back in line so people don't just say, why am I going to a store anymore? Um, there seems to be, and this is sort of tongue and groove with that, a CX improvement that appears imminent. We've again been barking about this one for a while. When retailers don't share customer data with their CPG partners and CPG partners don't share customer data back with retailers, the person that really gets hurt most is the customer because there's just not a lot of communication facilitating a better and improved customer experience. And people are just getting fed up. A couple of years ago, we started surveying consumers to sort of tell this he said, she said. Retailers say this about their stores. What do consumers really say? Retailers say this about their workforce. What do consumers really say? And it should probably come as little surprise that that delta is getting wider every year. Consumers are not any happier with the in-store experience. And so we were very heartened to see that there's some really practical solutions for that on the show floor this year that certainly seem quite viable. Planning is front and center. This is music to our ears. We've been talking about the importance of improving forecasting and planning long before the COVID pandemic came along. We've been just as loud about it ever since. This is, in many ways, one of the best cases for AI that we can see directly in front of us right now, and we'll have some examples to share with you later. This one surprised us. Um, I think I said at the top of this call, we plan our research agenda every year. Then we go to NRF and sort of, poke holes in it and say, does this look like it's going to line up with where the ship is headed? And then invariably the year kicks in and we end up having to turn a little bit because there's some things that just change as time evolves. We didn't know at the beginning of 2025 we were going to be focusing as much on the small and mid market as we did, but we did because the proliferation of these technologies when you combine how capable they are and how approachable they are, and then put them at a price point that small and mid-sized retailers can afford, what we're finding is a lot of the innovation is happening in that space. So the solution market is either catching up to that or helping to lead that, however you choose to look at it. But there was a lot more on the show floor focused on small and mid-sized retailers. Granted, that there's less zeros in some of these deals, but as we all know, little things add up. And then the last thing that was, a categorization for us is how much we saw on the NRF show floor focused around waste reduction as a strategic application, not just as something that you throw on at the end to maybe try to save a couple pennies, but part of your overall business go-to-market strategy, particularly in fresh items. We've seen some of this on the show floor. Amazon had a really complex and well thought out solution last year as part of their Amazon Go demonstration, but it was pretty tech heavy. What we're starting to see now is that the fallout of the idea being made much more attainable at larger scale going all the way down to item management for things that are small and perishable. And we'll share a bunch of examples of that as we go through as well. And if you do read our research, and thank you for that if you do, you know that we keep touching on this topic. We started in 2008 with our first ever, what we were calling at the time, green report. It had migrated to an environmental sustainability report. But really what it's about is about reducing waste. And so those are some of the most exciting things that we saw. But perhaps the thing we were most surprised by, and I alluded to this earlier, is that this seemed to be the show where AI gets real, specifically agentic AI. And if you read our stuff, we've been talking about this for a while. We take a lot of briefings with members of the tech community. And for our own sort of sanity and practical purposes, what we tend to do whenever we see a demo of something that is presented as agentic AI is we immediately lump it into one of two buckets. Is this something that's designed to create automatons? Is this designed to turn people into robots? Go to aisle 7, fill the hole in the toothpaste. Don't ask me why. Don't apply any critical thinking whatsoever, and then wait for your next task to come. Or are they things that are really sought to be agentic in nature and give human beings agency? Our workforce management report, which we're just writing right now, one of the biggest findings of it is when people work in retail, they want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. They want to feel like they're making a difference. And if you can give them tools that give them agency, whether they're in planning or whether they're in the store itself, that becomes a symbiotic relationship where they start to feel better about the decisions they make. They're helping the brand. Yes, they have tools that are helping them come to these conclusions, and the tools are fantastic. But you're for lack of better terms, you're empowering these people to do something really smart. And it's human nature to like that. So Brian, I'm gonna take a break from yapping here for a second. Why don't you walk through what this chart means to you and where it came from?
Well, very simply, it's talking about the enthusiasm that retailers have for AI. I think the discussion about AI is an important technology to put to business use is over. Now, people are really focusing on the use cases. And to prove the point, we asked a question. We've been asking this question for a few years now just to get a sense of where the attitudes are going. And you can see that retailers feel very strongly that AI-enabled technology will have a profound effect on the supply chain. It will also have make a fundamental difference in how retailers perform demand forecasting and merchandise planning in the next 3 years. We're already seeing that. And that AI-enabled technology will have a dramatic impact on how retailers interact with consumers. This gets to some of the things that Steve was just talking about. Now, they're hedging their bets a little bit on that last item. You can see that there's a much smaller group of strongly agree with that statement. And those are the answers we tend to focus on. But there's a lot of enthusiasm. There's still a little bit of skepticism. You can see that 28, or I think it's 31% of retailers don't agree with that last statement. We think they'll be proven wrong. And if the news is any indication, they might be proven wrong at the new Jacksonville Walmart store. So they should go do a little bit of road tripping to find out what's really going on. Anyway, for those of you who think that AI is still something that we have to proselytize about, I think those days are over. I think what we really need to do now is talk about specific use cases.
So it's a perfect transition into specific use cases of what we saw on the show floor. So the first category is the things that bring renewed focus to the store, and the colloquial phrase for what we're looking at here is Nikki's cool thing. If you know, Nikki Baird was a founding partner of RSR. She's now at Aptos and has been for a number of years, and she was really excited to show this off. Brian, I'm going to toss this over to you because I know consumer insights has been a Jones of yours as well.
Yeah.
How important is it that when a customer makes that conversion from the digital world into the physical world, that the person who's working there in the physical world has a chance to be relevant to that shopper?
Thanks for that. This was a great example of something that, in theory, has been in action in retail as long as I've been in retail, which goes back to 1971, believe it or not. But in the summary of our workforce management report, one of the top recommendations we make is that you have to deliver true 360-degree customer visibility to the stores. And what that really means is you have to integrate CRM, point of sale, and order management into a single interface so that the retailer associates can work with consumers directly on the sales floor. Now, those of you who've been in retail a long time, I've seen some names there. People who've been on both sides of the fence will recognize this as a digital version of the proverbial black book. I remember the black book because they really were black back in the day, or they were 3x5 cards in little Rolodexes.
Right.
This is the modernization of that, and as you can see, there's this theoretical customer, Jessica Jones, lots of Jones in Nikki's particular example,
Yeah.
and gives a very quick history of Jessica Jones' experience with the retailer. We're going to see a lot more of this. Aptos has got this with their Aptos One application, the big infusion of AI, but we're seeing it from others as well. So we expect to see lots more of this kind of sales enablement, all driven by mobility, of course, and with the availability of the data from CRM, point of sale, order management, and of course, inventory as well. So we're excited about this.
Absolutely. The next thing that is easily categorized, I mean, sure, you could call this a workforce management solution or a frontline worker solution. I believe Zebra calls it actually the AI connected frontline. But I saw an earlier version of this exact demo at their live event, their user group earlier this year. And what they did, which again, not to be repetitive, but if you tune into this particular broadcast each year, you know one of the things that we love is when a technologist brings one of their retail clients into the booth and has them do the demo themselves, right? It's if you can make it happen because it adds so much value. So this was Total Wine, and these two gentlemen were in the Zebra booth showing off this really, I mean, there's some hardware involved for sure. I mean, you would imagine, right? It is Zebra. But the software component behind it is driven by AI. And the example that was given that brought it home for me beyond any of the communication between employees in a wine store, you think about the amount of SKUs that are in there, you think about the amount of knowledge that an associate would have to have theoretically to be able to be relevant. It's pretty daunting, right? But if you do give them an ability to use agentic tools to help them fill in the blanks for consumers who have just a slight inkling of what they want. So for example, you go to a dinner party, you don't pay all that much close attention to the wine, you don't write it down, you don't take a screenshot of it, but you remember that the label was red and it had a bird on it. Now you go to Total Wine and you're overwhelmed by the amount of options in there. You don't know whether it was a Syrah, Merlot, whatever it might be. You walk up to an associate and you say, listen, I'm trying to find this wine. It was a red label, it had a bird on it. Boom, all of a sudden he's walking you down the aisle to the exact thing that you need. So this was when we talk about these solutions that are, not necessarily just technology and solution or in search of a problem, but a genuine fix to something that happens to everyone. They seem small, but these things add up. So for us, I mean, it was really nice to be able to see a practical application that everyone's just going to nod and say, "Oh, I've been in that exact situation. That would be really valuable." Again, it helps the associate to feel more valuable. They're probably less likely to say, I hate this job and everyone's always yelling at me, which we've seen quite a bit lately in our workforce management studies. So we found it really interesting. The next one's kind of a fun one. And this has a little bit of a backstory to it. We've been talking to Alan Malcolmson, who's a really interesting guy. He's a retailer turned technologist. He himself owned or still owns a Canadian Tire store and had a problem. And his problem was he never had associates where they needed to be when they needed to be there. So he, you know, went skunkworks, went into development and built a small button that simply calls people. If you can see where this little cardboard cutout here is, it's kind of like where this guy's, belly button would be. You just push a button. And I mean, you think about low tech and problem solving. This is as low tech as it gets. But what he found pretty quickly is in his own store, it was invaluable. And he thought, what would other retailers do with this? So right now, and here's Alan. He's about as likable a guy as you're ever going to meet. If you get a chance to meet him, you should. Um, but he's in pilot right now with a liquor store up in Canada called Big Red Liquors. And Big Red Liquors always only has two people working in the store. And the nature of their stores are they keep all of the really high-end liquor in the back room locked up, which means at any point, if a customer wants any kind of help with I'm not going to say a Pappy Van Winkle, but if they just want something that's a little bit better than, bottom shelf, it means somebody has to go back there with them. And sometimes both employees go back there with them. Now somebody, a new customer walks in and they're just looking around saying, where is everybody? It's a solution that I can tell you practically, having gone to a certain pharmacy while in New York to get some things and having to go all over the store to try to find somebody to open a case to get me, some toothpaste or whatever it was that I needed. Um, this is a real application. It could really work. So again, not everything needs to be super high tech and not everything needs to be AI. It's just a case of do retailers have a problem and can you find a way to address it? Um, this one, I gotta say, was pretty close. We always talk about best in show. This was pretty close up there for me. It was definitely in the top three. It's a company called Saloon. It's a long story. They were started as a division of Samsung back in the 70s. If you do know them, you probably know them as the EAS tag people. I'm no, sorry, not the EAS tag people, as the electronic shelf label people.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot more than that this time around. We spoke with them just before the show. They were brought to our attention, and I made it a point to book 30 minutes. They have a gentleman named Kitty. He's based in Singapore, and I will say it openly, the guy's brilliant. This booth was gorgeous, and it was set up in a really interesting way where you basically, I don't know how much you can tell from this, but if you moved in on the right side of your screen, you would move from the customer experience into the operations component, then into how the ways that they're working to monetize data, and then into their sustainability efforts. And if the short version of it is if you get a chance to talk to these guys, this is a store of the future, right? But it's not the store of the future that I remember from the, 20 years ago from the Metro AG stores in Germany, right? This is very practical. So for example, in the operations component, they are using their electronic shelf labels, but these labels are really small. They work from every single angle. They're very low cost, and they have 8 different color LEDs in them, red, orange, yellow, green, blue. If you're a grocer and you have people running around your store, filling online orders, and you need to light up, okay, Amy needs to go and get this box of cereal and that box of cereal and this thing over. Her her route can be all lit with the same exact tag that everybody else sees as red. And then Eric or whoever else is going to pick someone else's up could be blue. These are really, again, low cost practical applications for something that we talked earlier about. It felt a little reminiscent of things we've seen in the past, except this time the lift is a lot lighter and the cost is a lot lighter as well. So we were really impressed with these guys, and they'll show up a couple different times, particularly with their sustainability efforts. But from a customer experience component, it was really neat. Then there was a company called Sea Change, which we actually didn't get a chance to meet at the show. We met them directly after the show. And Brian, if you want to give me a break from this here, you can start this one off. I thought this was, again, just something that we've seen attempted before, but not executed nearly as elegantly.
Yeah, no, this was great. This reminded me of stuff that we saw back in, I think, 2011, 2012, had to do with visual analytics. Those early experiments in visual analytics failed because the data that needed to be analyzed was far too extreme. Those are the days we were talking about tsunamis of non-transactional data. I think that was one of our favorite phrases back then.
Yeah.
The problem is that there was no way to really consume that data in any reasonable fashion. And those of you who have been around the industry for a while remember that there was arguments about where should that data be filtered, at the edge or at the center, where, what do we do with it? How do we turn it into transactional data so that it could be understood? All of these just demonstrated that these technologies are not quite ready for prime time. Sea Change has fixed that. They've done a couple of things that are really great. First is they're using AI in real time to examine visual data streams that come their way. And the second, they've figured out how to use very low cost cameras to do it. And so that they can do all kinds of interesting things. They can of course catch misscans. They can track anomalies in the transaction itself. Barcode switching, we've all know this is sweethearting. It happens in every store, and they can intercept walkaways because they can essentially on a mobile device, they can empower a store associate to approach somebody who has perhaps not paid for something or maybe playing games at the self-checkout. So it was great stuff. And I think you have a mock-up of one of those screens, Steve.
I do. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. One of the first things that I asked them was, gosh, what do you have to do to the product information file in order to get this accurate? And as it turns out, they have a unique way of handling this, which deals with the dimensions of the product and doesn't get into some of the details that have bothered us over the years. For example, if you have a sense off packaging or a bonus pack packaging, those kinds of things in old visual analytics had to be very explicitly defined. So the maintenance of that data became a nightmare. These models are maintained in a very different way. I can't get into it too much because I only know what they shared with us in a short meeting. But if you'd like to know more, I really suggest you reach out to them about how they manage their model. The point is it's really intuitive, and it allows the retailer to respond in real time. For example, maybe somebody's having a problem. One of the videos that somebody shared with us was somebody in my age group who was struggling with the self checkout device. So there was an alert that went to the associate, who went right over to the person and helped them to get through the process. And another example they shared with us was somebody who was a real professional shoplifter. One of the most
Moving with speed and grace.
amazing
Yeah.
how clever this person was at stealing, and using the two-handed technique to scan one item and then put the other one in the bag and all this kind of stuff. I was impressed. This person was really well trained at stealing, and she got caught, and so I was very pleased to see that. And I was thinking, okay, all this visual analytics stuff has really come to fruition.
Right.
But more than that, it can also do some heat sink analyses in the store to tell you where people tend to queue up. And that's, of course, really valuable for a number of reasons. So if you haven't heard of this particular solution, check them out. Really interesting
Yeah.
stuff.
I think one of the things I really liked about their ethos was they assume that everyone's first error is done honestly, right? And they give the retailer the opportunity whether or not you want to engage at that point or whether you want to see what happens next. Offhandedly said, I wish that my local grocer had this. Because where I shop for groceries, they've gotten rid of almost all of the full service checkout lanes. Everyone's there at self checkout, and the self checkout, it's constantly not scanning, and everyone is treated as if they're a criminal. So I feel very, very bad for the person who's manning the self checkout scanning. The other thing I thought was really cool about this is we talked about how these things are coming down to earth. We assumed that this was going to require a pretty heavy duty overhead camera system. Not so. They can do all of this with just USB cameras, which are, not a lot of money these days. So the capabilities are becoming quite profound at low cost. This is another one that we just met for the first time at the show. And we've just started having conversations with them to try to understand. I mean, you talk about names or solutions that have been around for a long time that feel different this time around. This would be a classic example of that is Churchill Systems.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, this is one of those ones you think you're standing there, you're watching a demo, and you're like, I think I've seen this before, but it's very different this time around, and it feels like the industry has caught up to the thought process behind it. So, Brian, I don't know if you want to dig in a little deeper there.
Just very quickly, the folks at Churchill have been talking about demand forecasting for years. I first met them in the late 1990s, I believe, and officially met them for the first time at the old Chicago show, I think in 2005. So they've been around forever. They've never changed their tune. They were into neural networks before most of us knew how to spell that, and they've stuck to their guns the entire way. Well, as it turns out, demand forecasting is probably the single hottest topic having to do with the data analytics right now in retail, because of course the technology has finally caught up with the need, and the needs have all sped up. The cycle of change in the retail environment is very, very fast nowadays. So Churchill's been singing that song for a long time, and it's I think if you haven't listened to them in a while, you should, because they as I said, they've stuck to their guns the entire way, and they're really good at what they do.
Yeah. This is a little further on then. These are some of the numbers. The thing that I really took away from the first conversation that we had with these guys was, let me back up for a second. In every report that we conduct, and every time that we go out to survey retailers, we ask them what prevents you from moving forward on this topic, whether we're talking about loss prevention or we're talking about merchandising or we're talking about the store itself. And the answer, pretty uniformly, regardless of the topic that we're investigating, is we don't trust our own data. There's just we can't hand things over that we don't even have a way of guaranteeing or all we're going to be doing is making terrible decisions faster. One of the things that I thought was pretty impressive about these guys is they're more than happy to say, no matter what you have, we promise you we can improve it, even if you have nothing. So again, we got to dig a little further to see how that plays out. But if that's true, and they can really say, I don't care if your data is clean, dirty, it's got gaps in it, you have whole holes, for entire, segments of products, we can still guarantee that we're going to bring you some results. That's a pretty bold statement and a pretty cool thing to be able to say. Speaking of bold statements, JumpMind, if you know these guys, you know they're all about modern and mobile and store. They've actually sponsored a really interesting piece of research that we did last year, completely around the future of the store and what is it going to look like. And these guys, for lack of better terms, I know I said we don't play the Forrester and Gartner thing, we don't monetize that, but these guys get it. They really, truly do. And they are focusing this year almost exclusively now on apparel and jewelry. And what was the other category they were going after? Home decor. That's right. They're moving into home decor as well. They've been winning clients left and right. They're a pretty cool company. They're pretty cool people. They drink beers on the show floor like everybody else does. But this is some of the data that they actually helped us acquire last year. They sponsored this report. And Brian, I know this chart is near and dear to your heart, where retailers say that the store has irrevocably changed and is not coming back.
Yeah, there's a lot of good data in this thing. Of course, again, if you're familiar with our methodologies, you can see that we separate strongly agree from disagree. But I'd like you to look at the two bars in the middle because that's where there's the greatest level of agreement. Retailers believe that the store really does need to be more fun and easy for consumers to use. That's in recognition of consumers' much higher expectations of the experience than they used to have. They also agree that the majority of shopping journeys begin online, but the store is still where most of the transactions are completed. And we know this to be true, obviously. In my own life, that's how it is. If you didn't believe that, you can just look at the Department of Labor statistics, and something like 86–87% of all sales still complete in a store. So retailers understand this, they get this. They are bought in on the whole notion of a converged selling environment that is one part digital and one part physical. And so we think that, again, for those of you who are standing on the soapbox preaching about the need to pay attention to this, you can get off the soapbox and start talking about how we actually get it done. JumpMind is very clear on that.
So now we move into the workforce management space. And Brian, I'll stay with you on this one. This is Logile.
Yeah, Logile is an interesting company. One of the things I really like about Logile is that they are focused on helping retailers see their employees as strategic assets and not as costs.
Yeah.
And that's a huge plus. But there's another couple of things that are important in what they do is they believe that in order to do a true labor forecast and schedule, you need to know more than just the hours of availability. You need to understand sales. You need to know when those sales happen. You need to know inventory. You can't sell something that you don't have on the shelves. You need to know what your demand forecast looks like. And those things converge together in an interesting way to help retailers to create a much more precise labor schedule than they could in the past. So they approach this from a new perspective. There are a lot of HRM solutions out there. We all know who they are, and they do very good things. But this company was taking a whole new approach towards developing a labor forecast, which is really meaningful on a per store basis. So we like these guys.
Yeah, they had a quote that you really liked, Brian. We put it in here.
Yeah, I love this. Yeah, this is one that I filched from them because I liked it so much. It was effective labor scheduling is increasingly dependent on upstream labor planning, including accurate demand forecasting, labor standards, and skill-aware staffing models. Yeah. You start to think how much data is involved in that. It's quite a bit more than traditional systems have used.
There's Salesfloor, and Salesfloor, our contact at Salesfloor is a guy named Lawrence. He's a PhD. And we could talk to him for hours. I mean, we talk to him regularly just to talk about the status of where the workforce is and how retailers can really reasonably improve what they've sort of built for themselves at this point. Um, he has a clienteling solution, and he essentially came to NRF to try to find as many partners in this space as he could. But when we talk about treating associates with respect and making them feel like they're a part of something and they're not just what he kept calling retail jobbers, which are people who the moment that you hire them, they're automatically scanning, the job applications to see if the retailer down the street will pay them 15 cents more an hour. That this is really where his head is at. And again, those are the kind of companies that we most enjoy working with because they have a compass that is moving towards more than just reducing labor costs. Um, if you haven't seen this technology, it's really neat. They've done a lot of change in the last year. They were focusing a lot more on sort of customer-facing AI modeling, so you can sort of see how will a product look on me if I want to go for this type of vibe. They're now much more focused on the contextual tasks to maximize revenue. So if you don't know Salesforce, they're definitely worth knowing. Um, Workday, if you're in this space, you know these guys have been around forever. They did something interesting. They acquired a company called Paradox, and it's not an exclusive. I want to make sure I get this right. It's not an exclusive acquisition. So you can be a Paradox customer and still work with WorkBrain or any of the other workforce management companies. But Workday owns them now. And what I thought was really interesting about this application is it's a great way to bring on new associates who are already passionate about your brand. So, for example, you are someone who is shopping, insert your favorite brand, you're at the Gap. There are QR codes that Paradox manages in the store that say, if you love shopping here, how about working here? Customer picks up their phone, scans the QR code within seconds. Now they're filling out a job application. And it's a really great way to tap into resource because again, the whole point is if you can get people excited about your brand and you can make them feel like there's something part of something they really enjoy, then there's a much better chance that they're worth training, spending all that money and all that time bringing them up, and they're not just going to leave in 2, 3, 6 months, whatever the number is. So we were interested by that one. And then there's Zipline. And there was another company that I didn't include in here that I probably should have called Checker, who was in the space as well. And Checker did the same thing where they had these really provocative stats pasted all over the show floor. I didn't see them. You'd be walking down the hallway going to get a cup of coffee or whatever, and there was just stat after stat after stat about how dark and dismal it is out there for the workforce right now. But Zipline is a very interesting company. And this stat jumped out to me the moment I walked in their booth, which was only 29% of work that's being sent to stores is actually being done on average across the industry. That's not good. So they've built a frontline assistant, as you might imagine. It's interactive, it's conversational, it's all the things you would want it to be. And then they do they have these, if you go to their site and look through their offering, they have what they call core features and add-on features. This is a core feature where they have intelligent messaging and they can talk directly to scheduling messages when teams are most likely to take action. Again, it falls directly in line with what we saw at the beginning of the presentation, which is these aren't new problems. They're just new solutions that really work to problems that other people were way ahead of 20 years ago that just didn't happen to work that well. So a very interesting company. They got a lot of energy, and their booth was absolutely just full of people the entire time. So interesting company. And Brian, that brings us to what we are. I know it's only February 5th, but so far what we're calling the
So
chart
far.
of the year.
Yeah, this gets to do with what should be happening in the stores. So we ask retailers, of course, and we also ask employees, but this happens to be retailers. And what are we actually asking to have happen in the stores? And one of the interesting things about this chart is it shows high value. Again, if you're familiar with our methodologies, you know that we separate high value from sun value to little or no value. So these were high value activities. And the second bar is overperformers, people who are just do better than their peer group. And one of the things that strikes you right away is that winners are keeping up with the sense of value that they assign to these things. At the top of it, number one with a bullet is having more fulfillment center style tasks. The next one is more adopting more engineered processes to maximize efficiency. Of
Mm.
course, retailers are undertaking that so that they can afford these new services that they're providing to customers, and on down the line. The other thing is that you see is that average and underperformers are not nearly as accomplished as winners are in achieving these things. And this is one of the biggest differentiators we see this year between winners and everybody else in retail. So if you're a solutions provider, this is an opportunity to charge for you. All you have to do is help those average and underperformers catch up with the guys who are doing it so well already. A little bit of advice for those folks. I think that's all I'll say about that.
Well, also, if you're a
Time.
retailer, this is pretty much a warning sign that if you're
Yeah.
that the guy that's doing better than you is probably going to do better than you more next year because they're already buying technologies, implementing them, and
I want
happy.
to I want to point out one thing that I failed to mention it earlier, Steve, is that the one in the middle says focusing or infusing the store with more employee technologies. One
Yeah,
of the things that jumped out in our workforce management study and in the store study last year is that employees expect to be able to use the same type of technologies in their job that they have in their lives.
very big
And
part.
so if you don't provide those kinds of capabilities to them, you will lose. You will be an average or an underperformer.
Yeah.
Winners get this and others do not.
It's part of what folks look for when they're looking at jobs at this point. If
Right.
they've applied to a couple of different brands, they're like, well, who's gonna give me the technology that's most like what I'm used to using?
Right.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about the real customer experience improvement. Every year we write reports and we say it's really time to think about your customers and how happy or unhappy they might be. Um, this year we saw real improvements here. So this is from Esri. And Brian, I mean, we've known Esri for a long time, but God, they just keep finding new and interesting ways to do new and interesting things.
Yeah, so this is fun because it talks about two things, and I'm going to bring up a third example. This is a typical something we might see from Esri. If you've ever used maps on your computer, there's a great likelihood that you've used Esri. And one of the things that they can do is they can examine areas for geolocation activity, and they can analyze that data and help you to understand what it means to you. So this is the United States. That's a lot going on there, except over there in the left middle, because if you've ever driven across the country, you know what that's really like there. But we can take it down to a very close level. We can take it down inside of a store, and you can see that you're seeing the same kind of heat map activity inside of a store. Now, why would you want to know that? Of course, you'd want to know that because you want to put your promo items in the place where they're most likely to get the traffic. And if you're in that business, if you're in the high-low business with other retailers, you know that that real estate is quite valuable. So this is something that Esri can help you to do. We've seen some great examples, and I've used this story from them before. So if you've heard it, I apologize, but it's a great one. It talks about a Mexican retailer. It's called Oxo, and they have two stores on the same road in and out of Tijuana, Mexico. They have learned because of traffic patterns that they need to in the morning have coffee and donuts available to people going into town, and people leaving town at the end of the day. They want to have beer and chips available. Just they're literally across the street from each other.
Right. Two different assortments.
Yeah, but they know because of an examination of the traffic patterns that the traffic flows in different directions at different part of the day, and that causes the retailer to put different assortments in those two stores. That's a perfect example of the value of geolocation data. It could also do with last mile optimization, of course, and it could do if you're commanding a large presence in a micro market, for example, Manhattan. Based on travel patterns, you might want to keep some stores open 24/7, but others close at normal times. So depending on the traffic,
Yeah.
Esri can help you to do that.
And I was fortunate enough to actually be a part of a big ideas panel with Esri, and I was joined by a gentleman named Michael Rao from Nespresso. And because of that mapping capability, he shared a stat that it just gobsmacked me. I mean, we're big Nespresso clients around here, so we drink a lot of their coffee. We have it delivered directly to our home. But they're able to access 80% worldwide of their customer base with exactly 41 stores. And that's just phenomenal because they know exactly where to put them and how to put them. And then, I mean, there was just so many maps. When you put a map in front of someone to show them, you can look at as much data as you want, but when you see it in a visual format for a lot of us, it just puts things in context. So
Yeah.
it was a really fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. And so if you don't know Esri, get to know Esri. There's Saloom again, and this is on the customer experience side. And I know that we're running a little bit long here, so I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. But this is a visualization of, I don't know how well you can see these electronic shelf labels that are in here. But again, if you don't know these guys, they're worth knowing. We were very impressed with how they were able to stitch together a cohesive story of low, low interaction technologies throughout a store to improve pretty much every component of it. And that brings us to yet another chart, Brian, and this is the phygital world.
Yeah, I mentioned phygital earlier. I talked about converged selling environments. This is not a word that we like. If you don't like it either, then I
Yeah.
apologize, but it seems to have stuck.
Yeah.
I can't remember who invented the word, but that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
This is an example of what happens when we meld some of our data together. We have some consumer survey data and we also have some retailer data. And it's all about thinking about the stores, thinking about how much you agree or disagree with the following statements. These numbers, I strongly agree. Again, with our methodology, you pay attention to the ones that tend to be over 30%. So how I shop in the store has changed significantly. Yes, we know this to be true. When I shop in the store, I want to get in and out as soon as possible. The two things that no consumer has enough of are time or money. And when shopping in the store, I want the same kind of access to product information that I get in the digital world. These are the very things that the retailers that we shared, or excuse me, the tech firms that we shared with you earlier are trying to solve. Um, Here we see another one of those winners versus others charts. Again, if you're a solution provider, this is an opportunity chart for you. The winners most firmly believe that a store should be fun and easier for consumers to use. They are in tune with the notion that the volume of returns in online orders is creating new sales opportunities in the store, and personalized content available to shoppers while they're on the sales floor is valuable. So these are all in all interesting things from the point of view of employee and consumer enablement. But it gets down to the next item. In order to be able to afford to do some of those things, winners are, or at least half of winners, are very clear that they need to optimize the non-selling processes in order to be able to free up the money to afford these customer-facing or employee-enhancing activities. So just to give you a sense of how in tune or otherwise retailers are with their consumers.
Yeah. So that brings us to our fourth categorization of types of vendors that we met on the floor. And these are the ones around planning. And I know I said this earlier, we believe planning is an absolute wonderful space to talk about what AI can do, what it can augment, and what it can supplement. First things first, we were very pleased to connect with SAS. SAS didn't have a booth at the show this year. They were presenting from their partners' booths. But what we were really quite happy to find out is that they have recommitted we met their new retail industry lead. And the truth is, I wouldn't ever bet against SAS because they're making the statement, we understand retail better than anyone. They've been around a long time. We think of them as the white lab coat guys that were early and often on planning and statistical analysis. But the truth of the matter is, when we look at the theme of this show of technologies that, were ahead of their time, SAS certainly fits that bill. And these are the hard stats, right? So they have 1,400 retail and consumer goods customers worldwide, and they service 67% of the global Fortune 500 retail companies. So when we say that, we're happy to hear that they're recommitting and refocusing on retail, we genuinely are. Brian, I don't know if you have any more you want to add on that.
No, just they were data scientists again before we all knew what the term meant. They've been at this for a long time, statistical analysis of data, and they've taken real advantage of what some of the new AI capabilities to consume large quantities of non-transactional data and help retailers make sense of it, particularly in demand forecasting.
Yeah.
It's a great space to be in.
Yeah. Then there's Amazon. And the Amazon booth, if you were there, if you weren't, it was crazy. This was something called the Luggage Lab. And when you talk about a soup to nuts implementation of AI, going from ideation of a product to not only delivery of the product, but analysis of how it's performing. I cannot imagine a scenario that could have been done more succinctly and more creatively, honestly. So the concept was you work for a luggage company, you are a planner, and you say summer season is coming and some of our bags are too heavy and some of them are too big. How would we go about developing a new product and how would we know whether or not it's going to play out well? In the course of 3 minutes, you go from, and of course, every single step of this is assisted by agentic AI technologies, but you go to researching, designing, and building a product. The name of the fictitious luggage company here was Cloud Carry. Um, then you identify how you want to manufacture it, what your build materials is going to be, where you're going to do it, what the tariffs are going to look like, and. Um, and by the end of it, you're looking at an actual projection of profit on a product that 15 minutes ago was nothing more than an idea. It was fascinating. And it was jam-packed. People just standing around being like, trying to poke holes in this and really, truly couldn't. So we were really, really, really impressed with it. And this is just one component of the booth. They had all kinds of other, they were playing in fresh and waste management as well. But this was the star of the show, to the point where when I left, I actually asked the woman who works the front of the booth, I said, if you had to tell people and they had 5 minutes, what would you watch? They said, only that. So really, really, really cool. Or not only that, but start here. How's that? So Brian, walk through this chart and what it means for us as far as AI-enabled merchandise planning at a whole.
Well, we've been on this one for a while now, several years. We've been focusing on merchandise planning and the contribution of AI to make that happen. Right now, what's happening in the world is that demand forecasting is a process that runs continuously in the background and helps you to match against what's actually happening in the sales environment and changing your plans accordingly for in-season changes. It also, of course, is really helpful for pre-season planning. What retailers are seeing is that the AI is key to making that happen. Predictive AI-driven demand forecasting that underpins end-to-end merchandise planning. 60% of retailers believe that's very important. Top three opportunity. Improving visibility into deviations from sales forecasts. That's what I just mentioned. Essentially running in real time against what's happening in the real environment so that you can alert merchants when something is off. Price and markdown optimization to boost sell-through. This gets away from this notion of static markdown planning to something more dynamic. Shift to a holistic pricing, assortment, promotion, and decision-making processes. 31% of retailers believe that's a top three opportunity. And finally, incorporating customer insights. We're actually a little surprised that that's so low, the customer insights. And the only reason we can think of is because the others are more important.
There were so many other attractive options to
Some of
choose
the
from.
other options, yeah. But retailers bought in on this. So again, if you're on a soapbox preaching why AI is important for demand forecasting, you can move on to the actual use cases.
Agreed.
And this is an example. This is Digital Wave. I'll just jump in, Steve, real quickly.
Yeah.
If you've been a merchandise planner, and I see a couple of names on this list of people listening in who haven't, in fact, had that job, you'll know that this is the outcome of a lot of activity, a lot of data gathering, and to finally arrive at a dashboard that tells you the performance of a subcategory. In this case, it was active sportswear in women's apparel. The thing that's fascinating about Digital Wave is it's capable of gathering all that data and analyzing it very quickly. So instead of spending all your time as a merchant gathering the data, you're spending more of your time, much more of your time, actually reacting to it. And there are some other examples we saw in the sales floor, but this is an important one to pay attention to.
And then when you start talking about things that seem like you're having deja vu, we were having a presentation about Cindy, but it's a very different Cindy. So Symphony AI has been essentially, when you think about the Porsche 911 of the technology world, they picked one design and they just keep running with it and making, incremental improvements with each generation. That's what they're doing with the Cindy product right now. And we want to know more, is really what it comes down to. We hadn't talked to them in a while. I was able to do this demo on the show floor. And I mean, I know we're running tight on time here. Hopefully everybody can stick around for another 15 minutes or so. But if you haven't met Cindy lately, it's probably worth a few minutes of your time. So speaking of things that are worth time, the small and mid market was definitely represented on the show floor. I talked earlier about the possibilities for best in show. I had a meeting at NCR Voyix and I actually walked past it because I just wasn't expecting this. They've been essentially retooling this product for the past, depending on who you ask in the engineering team, either 4, 5, or 6 years. They've been heads down on basically going the direct opposite way of everyone else on the show floor. While everything else that you talk to a technologist about is based in the cloud, NCR Voyix is still rooting in the fact that there are retailers who are going to want control over their own systems, have the ability to do things in store, on premise, and I'm not betting against them either. Then in the last 6 months, they've done a complete rebrand of the brand itself. So visually, it was quite stunning. But when you started digging into the technology, this is a demo that took maybe 10 minutes about their neural network in store. It was genuinely impressive. So again, we're a little light on time, so we're going to keep moving quickly, but definitely worth. This is not your grandfather's NCR. Let's put it that way. Um, Epicor, Brian, you want to address this one?
Epicor is a company that if you shop at any Ace or True Value Hardware, you've experienced Epicor. They've been out for a long time. They were the default for a lot of these retailers, and they have a new version of the system which is web based and extremely friendly. The startup time for employees getting going on Epicor is really fast, measured in hours instead of days.
Yeah.
And it's dramatically changed how these retailers operate in their stores. It's heavy on the mobile side, which is wonderful. But anyway, what I really liked about Epicor, and you also see it by the way in NCR Voyix, is that this brings a lot of what I used to call big iron capabilities down to retailers that might just be one or two doors.
Mhm.
And it makes it possible for them to get the advantage of these latest technologies without a great deal of spending. So if you're into the SMB space and you haven't looked at these technology providers, you really should.
Yeah.
And there's some data to back it up. Um, One of the things we see, and we've seen this in two studies now, so I wanted to just point it out, and I put the arrows right here, is that small retailers see themselves as having an opportunity to differentiate from larger retailers with low cost mobile technology. So small retailers are bought in on this, and they believe they have a much greater opportunity to innovate from the larger retailers because they can move more quickly. So this requires on the part of solutions providers a whole different way of approaching them. And really, everything that they do in their store could be a skunkworks project before it gets rolled out to more stores.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity. Steve said earlier, there's a few less zeros and commas in their numbers than in the big ones, but it's every bit as worth going after as a big giant retailer.
Yeah. And for those retailers themselves, I mean, they see this as a real chance for agility.
Yeah.
So, in some of that research that we did this year, these are not in any particular order. It's not that number one is any more more valuable than number five. But these were the things that small retailers who we talked to in blinded case studies said they're able to achieve with this new generation of cloud-based solutions. And if you run a small mom and pop hardware store or garden center or apparel store, these things change your life. You know, the ability to improve your loyalty program gives you a chance to really connect with your community and get people to come drive past a Home Depot to come to your small hardware store.
Mhm.
These are really big deals. So facilitating greater mobility, we have research on our site if you're interested in reading it that dives into some of these things with blinded case studies with retailers who talk about how they're able to take an employee that's 82 years old, that's working part-time in a garden center, to learn how to use a mobile device and be able to help people check out in the nursery, section where they're at looking at trees. It's really quite interesting how user-friendly a lot of these technologies are, and how much they are transformational to the small retailer. So, um, the last real categorization that we have for everything that we saw at this show was, and again, we were really happy to see this. There's a significant uptick in demonstrations given to ways to reduce waste, particularly in fresh items, and not just as an add-on, as a strategic application. So this one, it doesn't really pop off the page the way it should, but this is Relax. And Relax recently acquired a company called, I don't know if it's IDA or IDA in Europe, but I had a chance to meet the co-founder of that company, and it's just one of the most fascinating backstories you've ever heard. He was in university. He and his co-founder were in the same class, and as a project, they had to try to find a solution for a waste issue. And his grandmother worked at a distribution center for a fishmonger. And he went in and he saw an enormous, I mean, nothing rots faster than fish. And from this, they were able to develop a product in a very short period of time that Relax snatched up, and they're calling it Relax Fresh. And what makes it so particularly interesting is you're not just trying to, run markdowns for food before it goes to waste. You actually have insight into your inventory enough to know where it should be, when it should be, and how you're going to make sure that you sell it through at the closest thing to full markup possible. What made it even all the more serendipitous is that in Europe, where this is much more of an issue and far more top of mind for retailers than it has tended to be so far in this country, every single customer that IDA had been able to sign up with was already a Relax customer. So it was a completely perfect marriage. So we're interested in learning as much about this as soon as we possibly can. This was our real first introduction to it, but this is an issue that's near and dear to our hearts. And anything that reduces waste and guarantees, particularly in grocery, the ability to sell product at full markup is just a win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah, just to add a quick word about that, this whole issue of moving from a fixed shelf life of products to a dynamic shelf life of product is really taking hold, and it's based on lots of new technologies that have become affordable. So, for example, you might have seen some of these experiments in Walmart and Kroger, but they're starting to happen in other places. The old story that I think people are starting to get tired of is one to send a price reduction, an in-store price reduction on bananas because you notice they're starting to turn brown. So you want to sell them at discount before you have to throw them away.
Yeah.
That happens to be a real use case, and particularly in fresh item management, this is a big deal. So Relax is grabbed onto this, and we're excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah. The next one that is part of this world, Saloom gets credit for it, but it's really a company called Upshop. This is fascinating because, and I'll try to keep this very brief here. I have a niece who, while she was at the University of Wisconsin for an environmental studies project, actually fed everyone in her dorm room with the bagels and baked goods that were being thrown away by her local grocer. The amount of waste that happens, particularly in grocery, because of the fact that when it comes to liability, people cannot donate food. Upshop is working to essentially know the lifespan of a product to the point where you can upcycle it. You don't have to throw away fresh produce just because it's a couple minutes past its prime. You can actually then donate it to homeless shelters, charities of your choice, things of that nature. So for us, I mean, I geeked out with these guys for a while. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't know Upshop and you're in the grocery space, it might be worth talking to them. And then there's Revionics. And Brian, I know this one is near and dear to your heart as well.
Just very quickly, Revionics is one of the oldest players in price optimization. We all know those folks. They've had a good run, but what they've done is they've invested in bringing price optimization more in line with daily merchandising decisions. So as opposed to the way it used to be, where you'd periodically roll through a category and examine your pricing strategies and adjust accordingly. Now you can do it on a per item basis, and you can do it in real time. So going back to what we were just talking about dynamic shelf life, you can imagine a world where some technology detects that it's time to mark down a product, and it can be sent through a system such as Revionics, which could then in turn notify a shelf edge technology that it's time to change the price. Does that seem futuristic? 10 years ago, it might have, but today it's very real.
Yeah. And just one other thing to plug in there. Revionics last year at the NRF show launched their first ever agentic offering. And they were teasing pretty hard this year that by April this year, they're going to have a much bigger announcement to make. So we'll be listening to see what that is, and
Yeah.
obviously eager to find out. Last one here was a company called Retail Insight. I'll be honest, I did not know these guys at all. We had very limited time, but they had a very interesting booth. So I just sort of stopped by and said, "What are you doing?" And it's a continuation of the theme here. The idea is sell product at full margin, particularly when it's fresh. They have essentially a three-pronged approach. First, they validate and ingest your data. Then they use what they call cognitive technology, which I'm sure we can all read between the lines there, that there's some AI machine learning going on to deliver actionable insights, whether you are on the retail side of the house or the CPG side of the house. In our conversation, they were able to share offhand some of their American or North American based retailers and CPG clients. And while they couldn't, you know, we couldn't put them here in the webinar, the ones that they were able to share predominantly, over across the pond in the UK, Coop, Marks and Spencer, obviously Kroger, Asda, these are huge names. So if you're a grocer, and this is an issue that's as near and dear to your heart, and you see an opportunity to try to reduce some waste and save some money and you know reduce the amount of water and soil and transportation and fuel that's required to bring food to market that's never going to sell, these guys might be worth talking to as well. So we thought they were really interesting. And that brings us towards the end here. So what's best in show? We don't love doing this part of it, but we have to, because everyone asks us what's the most interesting thing. And my dear friend Jerry at IHL, he and I always do this and make sure that we see what each other's best in show was. But for me, it came down to three, but in the end, it was Amazon. And I know Amazon made a lot of news in the last couple of weeks for the fact that they're closing, or what do you say, refocusing their Amazon Go and Amazon Fresh stores to be more Whole Foods based. But the truth of the matter is, and Brian, I don't want to steal your thunder, but you said a mouthful yesterday, which is we're lucky to live in a time when these guys have the might to invest in technology and try things so that the rest of us can all learn from them.
Yeah, I think that's true. Whether or not I remember that when I first went to an Amazon Go store, first thing that struck me was that the retail company that I worked in would never be able to afford all the technology was in that little box. The fact that this company is investing substantially in R&D related to retail is a benefit to us all, and so they deserve our thanks. Whether or not they decide to roll out the solutions they show off every single year at NRF, it's
Right.
kind of immaterial to me. It's just we all learn from it, and I think it's great. So thanks to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well deserved. I mean, really, we've been coming to the show again, I said, for a long time, and that was one seriously energetic and creative booth.
Yeah,
Uh, I should have made a Bitly link here. I didn't because we didn't even get this video until yesterday. But if you want to see a video of some of the stuff that was happening in that booth, Amazon was nice enough to share it with us, and it's down here on the bottom, and we'll make that available in the wrap up to this as well. So what does that mean for this year? So after everything that we saw at NRF, what did it confirm or deny about our own instincts about what we were going to write this year? Um, and these are the topics. Now, again, these are what we plan to write. It doesn't mean that we're not going to call an audible at any point and decide to run in another direction. But we feel that if we are going to meaningfully try to attack everything that we just showed you, not only from this NRF, but in all the NRFs previous, to address the industry, these are the topics that we're going to attack in 2026. So if you see something in here that's of interest to you, let us know. We're always looking, obviously, for sponsors for research, but also just people to tell us whether we're all wet on the topic, whether or not the survey that we've put together addresses all of the issues that it could. Sometimes, for example, last year, with our location analytics survey, we had someone reach out to us and say, well, why are you just asking retailers? Why aren't you asking their CPG partners as well? And we ended up launching two surveys there. And sometimes those are just things that we don't pretend to know it all, right? So we're more than welcome to accept all kinds of feedback, and we take suggestions here at RSR. So these are the topics for this year. Like I said, if you see something you like, don't like, please don't hesitate to reach out. And this is an example. We always reserve a spot to do some custom research as well. This is an example of some of the past topics that we've done around custom research. These aren't things that we touch every year, like the store or the workforce. But some of these came from outside of our four walls. People just said, hey, how come you're not looking at the way websites perform? Or how come you're not looking at anonymized retailer case studies on topic X or Y or Z? So Again, we are open to suggestions and we really encourage feedback. So please reach out with your ideas. And with that, we said we were going to try to do it in 45 minutes. We booked an hour and we went an hour and 15. So it all seems just about right to me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and let's have a good year this year in 2026. I've been in this industry long enough to understand that these waves of adoption of new technologies only happen periodically, but the waves are happening faster and the adoption rate is much higher. So we are living in truly exciting times, and it's a fun industry to be a part of. And we'll look forward to talking to you as the year goes forward.
Absolutely. Take care, all.